My therapist told me there are no problems, only opportunities. I said, well then, doctor, I have a very serious drinking opportunity. Is that in bad? I feel like that's in bad taste. Brothers, sisters, comrades, and friends, welcome to Bat Country. Okay, so I promise that normal service will be resumed shortly, and we'll return to the normal kind of deep dives into nuanced elements of withdrawal and alcohol use disorder, alcoholism, soon. We'll go back to those kind of normal videos shortly. But today is kind of an episode within an episode. Something interesting, I think, that I would like to share with you. This video, today's video, it began as a kind of normal, relatively light-hearted, sober travel journal, travel diary, about how I was going to remain sober on a very long journey. But it ended up with my life getting turned upside down. This week, I have been facing some very serious consequences of my alcohol use. The consequences have come suddenly and unexpectedly, and I think it's worth talking about. The way that the consequences of your previous alcohol behavior can creep up on you, especially when life seems to be going relatively well. So what I'm going to do right now is show you the original episode as I had filmed it and was editing it, right up to the point at which everything suddenly went completely wrong. And then we'll come back here and I'll explain what happened. Enjoy. 3, 2, 1. Having to do a very quiet mic check today because it's 3:55 a.m. and my girlfriend is still asleep. Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, welcome to Bat Country. Why is it 3:45? Okay, so in a recent video, I took you out with me on an event that I organised for a client. In fact, this very client here. And on the back of that, I've been invited to a major event. It's in Bucharest. I live in Berlin. I currently, for boring and legitimate reasons, I don't have a passport, which means that I have to get the train. And the whole journey is 36 hours in a chair. And in that previous video, I said it was going to be a test. Well, this is that times 5 and then some. So the event is a major conference for the adult industry, which is what I work in. And there is an awards show and a big conference in Bucharest. And that's cool, but it's a big challenge. This week has been very hard. A lot has kind of gone wrong. Nothing dramatic, nothing drastic. Just a lot of very small things that have added up to a very weird feeling of unsettledness. Just a general sense that something's wrong. And all the signs for this trip that I'm about to go on are bad. This is deep into Bat Country. And sobriety is very much on my mind all the time at the moment, in a way that it hasn't ever been before. All of the times that I've had a relapse and got sober over the last 4.5 years or so, I've never taken it as seriously as this. I just kind of, in the past, just expected that I could do it, and it's led to failure. And this time it really feels like it's sticking. But this event, 36 hours there, and then 4 days, basically, in a 5-star hotel in Bucharest, surrounded by adult industry types and potential business clients and just adult industry content creators, if you know what I mean by that. And then an awards show in which my client, the person who's invited me, are nominated in several categories. It's going to be a night of celebration as well. And I've been to adult industry events 1,000 times as one of my emergency alarm goes off. It's now 4 a.m. I've been to dozens of adult industry trade shows and award ceremonies and stuff, and they do get out of hand. It's a huge career opportunity for me, so I'd be stupid not to go. However, I have this terrible burden on my shoulders. I feel it in my bones that there is huge risk here for something to go wrong. And because the diarising my sobriety has been so useful to me for the past few months, I think I'm going to try to use this strategy more. And if you want to come, you are welcome to. And if you don't, that's fine. And if I have alienated you by saying that I work in the adult industry, I understand that too. I deal with that often, and I'm sorry that you feel that way. My train is in an hour and a half, and it takes an hour to get there by train. The journey is disgusting. You would hate it. I'd rather walk to Bucharest than take the journey that I'm about to go on. But I don't have the time, and it is time to go. Wish me luck out there. Let's go. Okay, so we are quite a long way into the journey now. I've been on the road for 10 hours. I'm sat in Vienna train station. In terms of sobriety, things are looking good. I'm over the hardest part. I've had so much coffee, I can hear colours. People often ask me why I move by train instead of by aeroplane. And I think it's because I like to watch the land change. There's something cathartic about that. Very grounding. In my drinking days, one of the things that I loved to do was long train journeys. Just go and get lost in the world somewhere and drink. And I'm trying to teach myself to love doing it sober. Cheers. Now, forgive the whole aesthetic that I have going on here. I know I'm scruffy and a bit of a mess, but this is the demeanour of somebody who has just spent 12 hours and more in the custody of the Hungarian police force. There's a building about half a mile away, and I've just walked from there. And it is the Department for Internal Affairs in Hungary, in this tiny town that I'm in, which I think is called Szeged. So I went to the border with Romania yesterday. I was pulled aside by the police and they wouldn't let me go through. Then I was taken to a police station and interrogated and so on and so forth. And the police asked me about my passports. They asked me I stupidly, at some point, I stupidly showed them a picture of an old passport. And they looked at it and then typed it into their computer, and then the things got very serious because that passport number was flagged as lost or stolen by Interpol. Because I had reported it lost or stolen. The interesting thing about that, the reason why it's relevant now, is because I lost it when I was drunk. For the last, 6 years? Yeah, six and a half years. That is all of the period of my worst drunkenness to relative sobriety to today. I've had a bad history of losing passports while I've been extremely drunk. And to the point where I've been issued temporary passports because the British government no longer trusts me to own a full one, and I have to go every year and reapply rather than every 10 years. And that's all because of alcohol. And I think what that has led me to conclude while I'm sat here trying to get back to Berlin and then back to the UK is that these are the consequences of drinking. If you know anything about my history, then I have a history with this kind of stuff. Usually drunken history. Which is why I was so glad yesterday to be fully sober when this was happening. It would have been so much worse. If I'd been drunk, I would not have got out of that situation. I'd still be there now forever. I think I would have been arrested properly. So it turns out, as a result of changing EU laws regarding how they handle British citizens in Europe after Brexit, I am now technically, without knowing it, I have become an illegal alien, which is to say, I arrived in Berlin, I arrived in the EU before Brexit happened, and I haven't left the EU and returned since. I've been there ever since. And for a long time, that meant I didn't have to worry about applying for special statuses or residencies. And that's no longer the case. And it's no longer the case in a way that was not communicated by the British government. Even the Hungarian police, to whom I was just speaking before I left, even they, this is a widely known problem in the EU, that the British government isn't telling its citizens what to do. Because this is going to sound a little conspiratorial, but it isn't. This is the case. This is the case. The British government doesn't want to publicise any negative effects of Brexit. It's that simple. It is a true statement to say that when the EU changed a policy about how it was handling people who had arrived, British people who had arrived in the EU before Brexit had happened, and it was negatively affecting them, that would make Brexit look bad and like it wasn't planned very well. Who would think such a terrible thing? Who would be so cynical? That's me. I've kind of fallen through the gaps, and it happened on the border of Romania and Hungary. The outcome of today is that the Hungarian police have given me a temporary residence in the Schengen EU area so that I do have freedom of movement now for the next 3 weeks. What it means is I have 3 weeks to leave the EU, to get my affairs in order, to apologise in person at the Hungarian embassy in London. That's not a joke. That is part of my conditions. Otherwise, I could be facing an EU ban. I have to go in person. And the weird thing about all of this is, as I sit here and I sip this coffee, and a little bit of me is a little bit proud of myself for staying sober through all of this, I'm drawn to an inevitable conclusion that all of this is still the result of my drinking. It's not even ambiguous. The reason why my paperwork is bad, and the reason why I'm not paying close enough attention to changes and policies that affect me in the EU, and the reason why my passport history is so bad and suspicious, all of that is because of alcohol. Sometimes these consequences, they take a while before they creep up on you. Okay, so what was that? Well, in short, I have been banned from the EU. I have been banned from the European Union. And that's a problem, because I live in Berlin, and I run a business here. So what happened was, as I was crossing the border from Hungary to Romania, I was pulled off of my coach and processed by the police, where they discovered that I had never officially applied for residency in the EU. I was told that that was not necessary for me because I had arrived before Brexit, where residency was not applicable. But those laws have changed, and no one told me. But that's not the point. We'll get to that in a moment. Over the next couple of weeks, I have to get an emergency travel document from the British Embassy here in Berlin in order to return to the UK, where I will have to reapply for a permanent British passport. While I'm there, I will renew my Irish passport because I'm also an Irish citizen. Then I have to apologise to Hungary at the Hungarian embassy in London, then re-register my business in Dublin, so if anything like this does happen again, I will have a backstop. And a million other expensive things to do at the same time. But my complex and complicated immigration status is not what's relevant for Bat Country, and I won't bore you further with those details. The issue at the heart of this, and why it is relevant to Bat Country, and why I would like to talk about it on this channel, is because all of this stress and bureaucracy, it is all directly as a consequence of the reckless and suicidal manner in which I used to drink. What I'm dealing with now is a product of my alcoholism. While the changing policies of the EU regarding Brexit are beyond my control, what I'm experiencing now is a direct product of my drinking. And I have to face that today. There are a number of very serious, immediate and long-term consequences of excessive alcohol use. I think most of us are familiar with them. And most of us tend to think of the health complications first and foremost among them. Immune system suppression, pancreatitis, liver disease, infertility, osteoporosis, and so on. A million other medical maladies that can arise from alcohol use disorder over time. And then on top of those, there are relatively newly understood problems associated with it. For example, alcohol-related lung disease. This is new to me. I only discovered that this was a real thing this week as I was researching for this video. Then there is the increasingly well understood cognitive decline involved in repeated cycles of relapse and withdrawal, which I've covered in an episode about the kindling effect. We're all also loosely familiar with the financial consequences of alcoholism. It is expensive to be an alcoholic. Beyond the cost of the booze itself, you're likely to pick up healthcare debts, and you're more likely to spend recklessly or just lose money. It just disappears. We'll lose our wallet and our bank cards, or we become a vulnerable target for theft. Then there are, of course, legal issues, such as DUIs, or violence, alcohol-related violence, domestic violence, trouble related to our behaviour while we're intoxicated, perhaps indecent exposure or trespassing, these kinds of things. All of these have legal consequences that are relatively immediate to the drinking. You drink, and then there is an immediate consequence to that drinking, whether it's financial or legal or related to your health. And I've dealt with those things. I've dealt with the immediate consequences. I've run up healthcare debt here in Germany. But this thing that happened this week on the border of Romania was so unexpected. A real wake-up call that I am not done with alcohol yet, or rather, the consequences of alcohol are not yet done with me. I still have big, life-changing problems to face. I've dealt with the immediate consequences. I've improved my health. My diet is good. My relationship is relatively stable. I've paid debts and made apologies. Some, anyway. And yet, even as I feel like I'm getting my life together, new consequences emerge, each one bigger and more challenging than the last. How many people can say that they had been kicked off a continent because of their drinking. So one of the major consequences, in fact, one of the major warning signs and triggers and consequences of my alcohol use is ignoring responsibility. You ever been nervous to open your emails, to go to your post box because of the fear of what might be there? You ever get a pang of anxiety when your phone rings? I have that, and that manifests profoundly in association with a relapse or with alcohol use. I am very much a lights out, curtains closed alcoholic. I don't want to see anyone. I want to shut out the world. Don't want to face my problems. I want it to all go away and leave me in the dark with the bottle. That's all that matters to me. But that is not a long-term strategy for survival. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It doesn't work in the long run. The consequences, as I can attest to this week, catch up to you, and they will catch up to you when you are least prepared. This week, it caught up to me, and through it all, through a 2-day overland journey, a day and a night in police custody in Hungary, a week of stress and admin and paperwork and embassies and EU bureaucracy, I stayed sober. Because where this kind of thing in the past would have just pushed me deeper back into the bottle, today I welcome it. Bring it on. Let's deal with it. Getting sober and facing your responsibilities is an act of profound courage and self-respect. It's the reclamation of a life I came this close to throwing away. This process that I'm going through now, as ugly as it is, facing these consequences of my drunkenness, is a process of rediscovering my potential and a signal that I want to embrace the future rather than wallow in self-pity. As a slightly frazzled version of myself said immediately after getting out of custody earlier this week, now the great thing about getting sober is not that all your problems go away. They don't. It's just that you're able to deal with them sober, and that makes them easier. So, good luck out there. See you next time.